thy servants who bear office in this country the spirit of charity and justice, that they may in all things walk before thee with a steadfast purpose and a single heart, and faithfully serve in their offices through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Most gracious God, author of all good things, we humbly beseech thee for the Parliament of Barbados, especially the Senate at this time assembled, that thou wouldst be pleased to direct and prosper all their counsels, to the advancement of thy glory, the good of thy church, the safety, honor, and welfare of our people. All this we ask in the name of Jesus Christ, our most blessed Lord and Savior. Amen. And now let us say together the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, that we may forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And may the grace of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be upon us now and forevermore. Amen.
This Senate is now in session.
Messages from Her Excellency, the Governor General. Announcements by Your Honor, the Deputy President.
On the announcements, I have, first of all, a message from the Honourable President. He did indicate on the last occasion that he would not have been here today, and he did make contact with the Senate earlier today, in which he made it clear to us that he is away on a Parl America's conference in British Columbia, and then he has to attend to personal business in the United States of America. He also wants the Senate to know that he misses the Senate and the senators, and he says that he is very sure that under the enlightened guidance of his deputy, that you will have a very profitable session today. And he hopes that all give the same thoughtful presentations to the matters that engage the Senate's attention. I also have word from Senator Moore that she will be a little late today, and also from Senator Monique Tate that she has some pressing business to do and that she too will be late. Senator Rudy Grant has written the Senate to say, please be advised that I will be traveling to the United States of America from the 13th of September to the 17th, and then to Panama and Colombia from the 18th to the 25th. And in this regard, he says, I will be unable to attend any Senate meetings during this period. Kindly accept my apologies and my best wishes to you and all honorable senators. And thank you for your understanding and cooperation. So those are the announcements which I would have had to make. Minutes. I have also the minutes of the meeting held on Wednesday, the 29th of August, 2018. And if there are no amendments or alterations to be made to those minutes, I will declare that those minutes will now stand confirmed.
Presentation of petitions, presentation of papers.
Mr. President, I am commanded to lay the following documents. Green paper on planning law reform, staff level agreement between the government of Barbados and the International Monetary Fund to support Barbados BERT plan, Barbados Fire Service Annual Report 2016, the Barbados Port Inc. Annual Report for the year ended March 31st, 2017, Transport Authority Annual Report 2008 to 2009, and the Transport Board Annual Report 2009 to 2010.
Question is that those documents, those papers, and those reports, no need for that.
Reports from select committees, questions to ministers, requests for leave to move the adjournment of the Senate on matters of urgent public importance, statements by ministers or parliamentary secretaries, personal explanations, motions relating to the business or sittings of the Senate, and moved by minister.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Standing Order 45-2 be suspended for the remainder of today's sitting.
The question is that Standing Order 45-2 be suspended for the remainder of today's sitting. All those in favor, say aye. Those against, say nay. Thinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Senator Kevin Boyce be appointed temporary chair of committees for today's sitting.
The question is that Senator Boyce be appointed as temporary chair of committees for today's sitting. Those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. Mr. Boyce will therefore be appointed as the temporary chairman of committees for today's sitting.
Introduction of bills.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice of the following bills. Criminal Procedure Amendment Bill 2018, Constitution Amendment Number 2, Bill 2018, Offenses Against the Person Amendment Bill 2018, Penal System Reform Amendment Bill 2018, Prisons Amendment Bill 2018.
The question is that the bills so mentioned be read a first time.
Mr. President, I beg that the following bills be now read a first time. The Appropriation Amendment Bill 2018, the Criminal Procedure Amendment Bill 2018, the Constitution Amendment Number 2 Bill 2018, the Offenses Against the Person Amendment Bill 2018, the Penal System Reform Amendment Bill 2018, and the Prisons Amendment Bill 2018.
The question is that the bills so mentioned be read a first time. All honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methink the ayes have it.
Public business. Order number 2, in the name of the Honorable Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Appropriation Amendment Bill 2018.
President, as I rise to move the second reading of the Appropriation Bill 2018, I just want to say briefly that the matter certainly of this bill is the amendment to reallocate the sum of $1,700,000, not exceeding $1,744,410,904, as was appropriated earlier this year, in March this year, when in terms of the Appropriation 2019 Act for the service of the government of Barbados for the period of the 1st of April to the 31st of April 2018 to the 31st of March 2019. And this amendment becomes necessary to facilitate the reorganization in terms of the ministries. All honorable members will be aware that after the 2018 election in May this year, that a number of new ministries were created. In addition, there have been reallocation of departments among ministries. And obviously, to allow for the proper financial systems to be carried forward, they would have to make provision for these ministries to have budgets. And in this regard, the appropriation, the simple amendment is to facilitate that. I'm not going to go into details in terms of the different ministries. I think all members are aware of that. But in order to allow government's business to be carried out and proper function of these ministries, I want to make it absolutely clear it is not an increase in the sum or the quantum which was approved in March this year, but is merely reallocating that quantity among these various ministries and the reallocation of departments within ministries. Of course, it has all been conducted through the Director of Finance and his department and the Ministry of Finance, and the permanent secretaries are aware of the procedure in situations like this. And as I said, it's a simple amendment to facilitate and to regularize government's financing in the various ministries. And with these few words, I beg to move that this bill be now read a second time.
Question is that the bill be read a second time.
Mr. President, this bill has been certified as a money bill, and therefore I do beg to move that it be read a third time.
The question is that the bill so mentioned be read a third time. All those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President,
The motion is second reading for the question, please.
you want me to do it? Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Appropriation Amendment Act 2018.
The question is that the bill so mentioned be passed and be so cited. Those against, those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Order number one, sir. In the name of Senator Ms. Elmore, Minister of Information, Broadcasting and Public Affairs, to move the second reading of the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2018.
Senator Moore.
Thank you, Mr. President. As this honorable chamber knows, the Road Traffic Amendment Act we're seeking to have that amended as the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2018. As the Chamber knows, the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs and Investment had outlined a series of budgetary measures in June of this year. And one of those measures was the abolition of road tax for private vehicles and the imposition of a new tax. For these changes to occur, it would require an amendment to the Road Traffic Act Cap 295, which would then result in the Road Traffic Amendment Act of 2018. This amendment has many positives to it. The first is that it seeks to abolish the road, road tax and replace it with a tax that's more efficient. And that tax is a fuel tax. Secondly, it also seeks to see a new registration fee on new vehicles and on second-hand vehicles of approximately $400 on registration of these vehicles each time that is done. So when you're buying a new vehicle or a second-hand vehicle, there'd be a $400 fee. Commercial vehicles will pay $1,000. As you know, previously, commercial vehicles were never defined, and this act also seeks to do that as well. And it seeks to define a commercial vehicle as, and I beg your indulgence, Mr. President, a commercial vehicle will be defined as a vehicle used for hire, reward, or any vehicle that's used in the course of business, enterprise, and includes vans, lorries, tractors, trailers, and public service vehicles. Now, the public service vehicles themselves used to pay a much higher fee. Some paid as much as $10,000, some paid as much as $20,000 a year. We now seek to have that reduced. And so instead of paying at that higher rate, they would only be paying 50% of what they previously would have paid. And so obviously someone who would have been paying $10,000 will now pay $5,000. It is also proposed that we also introduce some new number plates. Commercial vehicles before never had a specific plate for a commercial vehicle. You would see a sign on the side of it, which would indicate that it was a commercial vehicle. We're now seeking to change that, where they would now have their own separate number plate. And the number plate would start with the letter C. And that would clearly identify all commercial vehicles and all people who are engaged in commercial activity, you know, having a definition of what constitutes a commercial vehicle along with the license plate makes it much easier now to ensure that people are adhering to paying the necessary fees for commercial activity and not people having their vehicles licensed as private vehicles and engaging in commercial activity. Now, there's also another change, and that change is but it's not a change. In the past, you had people having a sticker just in the window, which would indicate that they had registration. But now that we've abolished that aspect of it, they will still be required to have a sticker inside their vehicle, on the inside, but that's to show the ownership of the vehicle. It will also show where the person lives, as opposed to just having a name on it. And on the back, we're proposing that they have a sticker attached to the bottom left-hand side, which then clearly, the top right-hand corner of the number plate, the top right-hand corner of the number plate, that would then indicate that the vehicle is properly registered and on the road, and that their road tax, and their insurance has been paid. So this allows people, when they, if you had a problem and you got into an accident, you only have to look at the back of the vehicle and you know clearly whether the person has complied and their vehicle is insured. As to what would happen in the past, people sometimes get into the little fender benders or an accident, person can't find the insurance certificate, not in the car, all over the place, and a lot of confusion. We think this makes the process a lot better. It's a seamless process when one is able to clearly identify that a vehicle is insured. It also makes it easier for law enforcement persons as well, because they can, as they are behind you or driving, they can clearly see whether you are insured or not. Now, these license plates will also have some smart features in them that allow for other things as well that one would be able to see, because it would not be your old traditional, like just get a plate and stick on the car. Because, you know, there's been a problem in the past with people with these license plates. They just take any number and put it on their car. This stops a lot of that, because you still will not have the sticker. So I'm sure many of us have heard, have seen, you read the paper, you hear about people driving around and they have a vehicle license plate and it actually belongs to someone else, the numbers on it. So this clearly will allow people to clearly identify whether that is the plate, as well as if that person is carrying insurance without even having to stop the vehicle. Now, there are two other categories of vehicles that are within this amendment, and that's motorcycles. Motorcycles will be treated as private vehicles, but will be categorized as commercial when being used for any other purpose than private use. So obviously, you know, people sometimes use motorcycles to carry on commercial activity. And so those persons would then be treated commercially. Those having their motorcycles that are using for private purposes, those would be treated as private vehicles. Now, all ATVs, we see them on the road all the time, all-terrain vehicles, I think is the correct name for them. They will be treated as cycles for the purpose of the fees that they have to pay. Because right now, as you know, there was no real classification for those, but they will now be treated as cycles for the purpose of paying their fees. Now, we believe that these amendments to the Road Traffic Act that we're proposing will certainly ensure better compliance on the part of vehicle owners. It will also ensure better ability for enforcement on the part of those persons who have to enforce the road traffic regulations. It also is a more seamless process and takes away some of the difficulties associated with compliance of owners. Now, the fuel tax that replaces the previous registration also is much easier as well, because there are many, many vehicles on the road today that really, they are not paying road tax, they're uninsured, and there's no way but it's been very difficult to have these persons comply. But certainly with the fuel tax, once you are driving a vehicle, you are then paying in order to be able to drive the vehicle through that fuel tax. So it's a better way of being able to have people comply than under the previous methodology that was being used. Now, the The final thing that will be changed will be Schedule A of the Road Traffic Regulations 1985, which will be amended to ensure that the insurance certificates reflect the use of the motor vehicles as either commercial or private. So that way, we know for sure that people are also paying the applicable insurance for what the vehicle is being made to do. Previously, as you know, people would have vehicles engaged in commercial activity, have them insured as private vehicles, incidents occur, and then, of course, there's always then becomes a greater difficulty for persons to be able to get some level of resolution to whatever occurs, whether it's an accident or what have you. But with them now being properly insured as commercial vehicles and not as private vehicles, that also too contributes to better enforcement, better accountability, and better ability to be able to collect the necessary fees in relation to what that vehicle is being used for. So, Mr. President, we are seeking to change then the amend the Road Traffic Act in order to come up now with the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2018. Thank you. Bless you. Oh, yeah, I'd like to move that this bill be read a second time.
Question is that the bill be read a second time. Senator Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy President. I shall not detain the Senate too long, but I want to speak on some aspects of this bill. My difficulty with this bill, sir, is that, like most things the government has done so far, they spring it on the country and don't allow for debate among the populace. Let people know what is happening and let them discuss it. Because I don't think all the best brains in the country reside in the Ministry of Public Works. In some cases, so I'll let other people, let there be a to and fro, and you could have produced a much better. But I understand this is a bill where government wants to get some money and they want to get fast. And you throw in a few other amendments to make it look like you're just doing a little thing. But the amendments were not properly thought out, and these amendments were just a little dressing, but when you put lipstick on a pig, you still got a pig. These should give us the time to go through these amendments properly, give the country the time to go through these amendments properly, and then you will get a much better, because you're going to go back just now and amend these again, And there are lots of other things in this act that needs fixing, but I'll deal with them a little later. Things that need addressing quite urgently, but they're not here because you rush and get a few, and they made 38 amendments, and they're not substantive. They're just to get money, as I said. The objects and reasons of this bill is that the abolition of the road tax and the payment of registration fee and some other things. I listened to the minister on YouTube explaining or presenting the bill before the House. And he said one of the reasons is that there was 120,000 vehicles in Barbados, and the ministry did a survey, and that survey showed about 20,000 vehicles were not paying the road tax. Well, I have to compliment the minister because, and the Barbados party all together, because they were so serious. They knew that they can put in a manifesto long before they found out that this thing was happening. He said, this was in the manifesto. How they knew about this survey unless people were leaking government information to them? And unless you get a little leak, you don't come on and advertise it and tell everybody, But I don't believe that. This was a justification after the fact. This bill sought to bring in more money than we were getting from Rota, and that's what it's all about, bringing in more money. The road tax, like I used to pay $400 for my car. The one I don't have no longer, that was written off. No, a young lady rear-ended me. And rear-ended me too. And I would pay $400, that's it. I did a little calculation, because that car, because I do a lot of traveling, I would fill up every 5 or 6 days. So I assumed 5 or 6 days a week. I said there are 52 weeks in a year, well, and that was 45 liters every 5 or 6 days. That comes to a tax of $18. At 40 cents, that's $18 per week by 52 weeks. $936 I'm now paying for road tax, as opposed to the $400 that I was paying before. It is a grab, it's a tax grab, making more money. Mind you, government must learn from experience that when they put the private sector to collect government revenue, they don't get it. So they might get even less money coming in from this tax than they were getting from the road tax. Because just like VAT, they don't get 50%, you don't get 50% of the money that's collected at VAT. So I warn you, you could have stayed where you were, even if you want to, but make me pay another $50, I don't mind. Why pay $936 now, you know? And I have to travel. So as I said, I did not believe the reasons behind it. It was just a way to get more money, because you realize that there's all these cars, there are people driving, and you know how much gasoline was being sold every day, every month, every year, because everybody knows. It's not something that you can hide. So when then you apply that 40 cents, and you know exactly how much money you were planning to take from the country, and it was a hell of a lot more than you were getting for the road tax. That's what it's all about. And because if you wanted it to be revenue neutral, you would charge about 20 cents. But it's supposed to be revenue neutral, it's supposed to get some more money. Again, sir, if it was just supposed to make sure that people pay the road tax, just like how you're doing for the insurance, by putting a sticker on the license plate, you got to put a sticker on the license plate to show that the road tax was paid. That's why they can't believe it. You know, don't treat the country like we're foolish, we don't understand things. You know, right now, the government is basking in the glory of having won the election, and everybody loves everybody else, and everybody cares. So you can feed them a lot of foolishness. And people will even go on the calling program and say, I don't mind paying it, they mind paying it. But no, you know, they love you. But the same fellow that love you today will curse you tomorrow. Remember the last people, they were loved too? And now all of a sudden, they only got 30% of the love. You understand what I'm saying? So stop doing these things to people and think that we are foolish and don't understand that the government is going after our monies, taking away our money from us, and we are so happy to give it to them. I'm not. You know? I am not. I don't get enough. You know? Again, also, sir, and this is a point that I've made before, and I can make it on the floor of the Senate. If this tax was supposed to replace the road tax, why put it on kerosene oil? Because kerosene, a lot of old people cook with kerosene. So if it was supposed to pay the road tax, that means you're paying road tax on the stove. And I've never seen any stove pass me on the road. You know, I drive slowly, so one or two would have passed me, but no. You know? No, it's not replacing road tax. You are going after people's money, and you're finding a way and deceiving people. You don't pay road tax on stoves, don't pay road tax. So why charge you the fuel that you put in the stove? You see where I'm coming from? It is not believable. Yes, sir. I want to go through some of the other things that the Honourable Senator who led off spoke to. She spoke about the commercial vehicles and this new definition for commercial vehicles. Again, sir, that does not make sense to me, you know. I might have misunderstood. A commercial vehicle now is a vehicle that you use for hire or for reward or something like this. So if I have a container truck and I don't get up to nothing, I can drive out a container truck as my private vehicle. This is what I understand from this thing. Tell me if I'm wrong, and I'm prepared to sit down and let somebody explain it to me. So the road tax was designed, and the bigger vehicles paid more because they did more damage to the road. Right? Commercial vehicles, now I can take my container truck and drive out, take my children to school in my container truck as a private vehicle according to this legislation, you know. I don't know. That's what it says to me. As I said, I could be wrong. Moving on along quickly, sir. There's the next thing I think there is another aspect of governance in this country that I do not understand, I do not like. You remember the Jam Buster? Years ago, we had ZR men and minibus men doing with the light on the road, passing you at roundabouts, passing you on the inside and all kinds of stuff. And we couldn't get stopped because of the police and holding them. And if you get hold of the police and when they get to court, the marshal gets loads along, taking years before they get before the court. So what government did? Government then legislated that you can do that foolishness and call it Jam Buster. Now we have a situation where people are now breaching the law again. You have minibuses that had a seating capacity. There was 11 to 24 seats minibus, and the taxis had a maximum of 15 seats. Fellas put additional seats in the vehicles and drive all about the place every day with them, and when they come to licensing them at the end of the year, or the beginning of the year, whichever, they take out a couple of seats and go in and get the registration sorted out, drive around the corner, put back in the seats, and government believes that that is something that they should encourage, you know? So because the fellas decide, I put in more seats, and when they can't stop me, same thing like Jam Buster, you increase the seating capacity because people were breaking the law. And it's about the fellas breaking the law and doing all the time, but let me go along with them. That's what's happening in this country, you know. Well, if you're killing all the time too, so let me go along and let killing be okay. You have to stand up and say to these people, enough is enough. If you break the law, we're going to take away your license or something. Because these are men. I go to the bus stand, the river bus stand, and they block the road. Half an hour for me to get out the bus stand, and I'm driving through. You know why? No police are there and they're in discipline. And we encourage this in discipline, but every time they break the rules, we change the law to accommodate them. You have to put police to watch them, or it's chaos. And we are satisfied with that. I go to St. Lucia fairly often, and I go into the bus stand. Not one policeman. And they have something, the buses look like bars at ours. Fellas drive in, park, and when they fill up, fella move on. No police in sight. But if a police is not in sight in Barbados, there's fighting, there's noise, and guns and all kind of stuff. And we, rather than deal with that, we encourage them. By every time they're breaching the law, we legislate that the breach is no longer, but go ahead. This nonsense is going to stop, you know. Yeah, because they took the seating capacity from minibus now from 11 to 24 to 21 to 57, and the taxis are now 20 seats, from 15 to 20. I have a little problem with that. Did the minister consider that there are some small yellow minibuses that had the same seating capacity as the ZRs? And for whatever reason, the fellow couldn't afford a big one, and he was happy and contented to transport 15 people, or with the additional seats, you know, putting 2 seats and car 17 or 19, as the case may be, I don't know. But, so those minibuses that are registered, those small minibuses that are registered for 15 seats, that have 15 seats or so, what will happen with them now when you take the minimum seating capacity from 15 to 21? Those little minibuses will no longer qualify to be a minibus. Did we think this thing out carefully, or are these people now going to have to register those little things as ZRs or go to business? I don't think anybody thought about that. But I checked. And the person I checked with was one of the owners. And his concern is that, well, I don't know what we can do. And I don't know what I can do either. You have to, as I said, think these things out before you implement them. And why we're going to have these problems? Because the minister want to rush to Parliament and let Boise be doing something and passing things that could be fixed. They're going to come back and fix these again, you know. Why? You know, this euphoria we win and we're going to show people that we're working. Yeah, you got to sit down and take your time and learn what you got to do first. Mind you, they're not all bad things about the bill. You know, there's one positive thing that I support, even though some of my friends don't support it and they tell me that I should talk about it, but I'm going to disappoint them and go against what they were advising me. The fees, the penalties for driving without insurance has been increased to $5,000. And I suspect that is too low as well. It moved from 1,000 to 5,000. That is too low. You know the danger of driving on the road with a fella who don't have insurance and then he hit you? Well, I know. I had to sell my car in parts because a guy drove through the junction. I was driving on the main road. He came to the junction, hit me and sent me to the hospital. He didn't have any road tax. He didn't have any insurance. He didn't have a license. The only thing he had going for him was a police relative, and the police didn't charge him. That's the only thing he had going for him. So when they checked to see what was happening with the case, matter of fact, time for charging is gone, you got to charge within 6 months. You know? That's it. This penalty should be a lot greater. You know the damage you can do. Put a breadwinner, a sole breadwinner in the house, he's driving on the road on a licensed vehicle. You hit him, might kill him, or worse, you might incapacitate him to the point where he can't do nothing for himself, and he still got a little church and a mortgage to pay for, you know. And then you don't got no insurance. What will happen to that man and his family? $5,000 is small, and there should be some jail time attached to it. I kid you not. If you don't have the insurance, put down the vehicle, because it becomes now a weapon. And in some cases, a weapon of mass destruction. We need, and stop, the $5,000, I heard the minister conking out and saying, well, you know, if you multiply by this and that, the feds will go and pay it. No. We have to make sure that these penalties are such a deterrent that you will not want to consider driving your vehicle without insurance. Too much damage has been done. I know the lawyers in here who can tell you when people come to them and they find out the bad news that they have to deliver to their clients, you know, not only the bad news for them, but the bad news for lawyers too, because they may get the fees. But we need to be more serious about what we're doing. You know, if they needed a study, if they needed to do a study That's one they should have done. Just check and see how many people have been injured, and I am one. And then the fellow who did the damage walked away free because, first of all, he's a man of straw. And so you're suing him for what? And then, you know, you didn't even get charged by the police. So we need to do something about this. We need a more comprehensive review of this legislation rather than these measures to raise tax and put in another little thing. Mind you, I can tell you something. The abolition of the road tax came in the budget. You cannot abolish a tax in your budget. The law does not allow it. A budget is for raising money quickly. So government got to sit down and get its act together. Learn your craft. Find out what it is you're supposed to be doing and do it correctly. Right? You can't abolish the tax in the budget. You can only raise the tax in the budget or introduce a new tax in the budget. Anything else after that. So when you bend the ministers abolish the tax and people stop and tell people don't pay, I remember the minister telling people, man, put down the vehicle and drive and don't drive for a couple of days if you got better for you, and then they come back because they don't know what the hell they were doing. Get your act together, you know, because you're going to give people a lot of stress, a lot of grief. And there are lots of things, Mr. Deputy President, that with the laws as they are now, that needs to be fixed. And you rush to Parliament with 37 amendments or 38 amendments, not substantive amendments. Enforce the laws that we have and observe what is happening. Look, we have a situation now. When I'm coming from home on mornings, I approach the traffic lights by Oxnards. When the lights say go, I dare not go. Because you have 4 or 5 cars passing through to make sure, to beat the lights. My light already on green, you know. But then fellas ain't stopping. Come to University Hill. Fellas ain't stopping at all. And people behind me blowing like they want to go meet my maker. So I ain't moving either. I go a bit to make sure them fellas stop. We need cameras. Yep. We need cameras and we need them now. People believe that when you come to a junction, but that's controlled by a traffic light, that amber means get too fast. And they rush through. And even when it turns to red, just keep on going. Amber means stop. Unless it will be dangerous for you to do so. Because if you say amber and the fella coming behind you with a container truck, but he don't stop, you keep on going. But no, fellas see they say amber and the fellas speed up. And it changed, no, but I intend to get through there, you know. So I don't care what that traffic light says. If government want to raise some money, I can tell you, put some cameras on all the traffic lights in Barbados, and you will see the money that rolling in. You will know the VAT. That is for the first year. Because then people will realize that they got to stop this nonsense. You can't dare respond to go when the lights say go. You got to look and see what's happening first, and let the fellas feel like stopping. Do fix them. Don't come in here with these monkey amendments. Do things like that. Fix them. You know? Bring the cameras. Another thing that bothers me, sir, on these roads, you are supposed to have a white light in front of the car too, headlights. Some nights I am driving, I have to pull to the side of the road and stop. Some fellas come with these lights, they are bright, I don't care, they're dazzling. I can't see past them. Imagine I'm a driver of a transport board bus with a whole lot of people in that same position, and these big, bright lights on, and fellas into me. And you trying to avoid the lights, and next thing you drop in a gully. Bus load of people. Fella go along with heat lights and left you there in the gully. And they can say the driver carelessly and all kind of stuff. Me, when I see them come in and they can't see, I stop. I pull over and stop. But we need to make sure that these don't come to Barbados. When the importers bring them in and they got those kind of lights, MTW, or what they call it these days, should tell them, no, you can't sell cars with them lights. fix them. If you can't fix them, send them back. But they're not allowed in Barbados. Don't tell me that they met with them. Let them met with them, anything could change. That is a danger that needs to be fixed. Or we're going to have a tragedy as a result of it. And, you know, my words are prophetic. You know, the last time I spoke here about somebody going to get locked up and think somebody get locked up. So I don't want this to happen, so I want that fixed quickly. I am going to finish quickly soon, but I want to touch two other things. Roads. The roads. We have a lot of, you know, now, but I drive on the road. Yeah. We have a situation where we pay people good money to build roads. And within months of that road being constructed, it falls into potholes. You know? And then, to fix the potholes, the fellow from MTW come down the road with a truck, throw some black stuff in the road and get 2 lashes with a shovel, and pothole fix. And as soon as anything drives through that black stuff, it pushes out the hole and you want a nicer hole. You know? We got to be serious. You know? The roads are not properly built because they build them on marl. And when it was a little boy, I used to watch the people put big rocks down the road and then put marl on top and then roll them and think, no, they're not happening anymore. We building roads on marl and then the marl get washed away as soon as the rain comes down. And almost every road in Barbados is a trap. And when you fall into these potholes, or even when you have these grills on the road and you can't dropping them, you're taking 5 years before MTW compensate you. There are one officer understand who's supposed to investigate these things and then report back. And people waiting for years for the damage that's caused by the road. Through no fault of their own, you know. We need to fix things like that. Those are things that need to be fixed. And lastly, sir, I saved this one for the last. Driving tests. People go to get driving tests and they get the license and stuff. But we have a significant number of people who get the license and don't go for the test. And they are dangerous on the road. And I can tell you, I'm not going to call the names, but people will tell you which person to go to and pay your fees that you don't have to go and do the driving test. We need to stop this. I'm not going to call the names, sir. We need to fix things like that. Don't come with the tax grabs and try to put lipstick on this pig to make it look good by other little amendments. Get your taxes. Enforce the law to get your taxes. But treat us with respect. Treat us like we know, that we are not all adoring or doting yard folks that will hang on every word that the party says. You know, some of us don't necessarily worship at the same altar. So we can think. I'm sorry that, well, this is going past today, but I'm sorry that it didn't get the kind of publicity that it should have gotten for what you think are substantive amendments to the Road Traffic Act. With those few words, I'm obliged to you, sir.
Thank you for your presentation, Senator Franklin. Senator Boyce.
Thank you for your leave, Mr. Deputy President. The legislation which is before us is one which the government duly advertised was coming. And I believe that the senators on the government side will reiterate the mantra, promises made, promises kept. Seeing the mandate that has been delivered for the said government, the comments which I propose to put forward go along the line of items for consideration with regard to the implementation of the proposals, and also utilization of the new legislation to, if at all possible, ease the process of doing business at the ministry responsible. I think we all here are aware of the pleasant procedure of attending to the ministry, and it's a very good time actually to interact with other citizens and persons, because you do sometimes have to spend quite a while down there. So the first suggestion would be that if there is going to be this requirement with regard to the registration stickers, and if the registration card process is one which is to be conducted by the ministry, and this was an issue with the previous government sometimes, that adequate resources are allocated as much as possible to ease the process of getting the actual sticker printed, so that persons are not turned away in frustration by the length of time it takes to be done. So that would be the first recommendation that I would make. The second suggestion would be that the penalty imposed for Section 34 perhaps should not be in line with the 5,000 provided for the other breaches of the legislation. Given that Section 34 contemplates, as proposed, someone willingly manufacturing a registration card to make a fraudulent imitation or fraudulent use of. And while other things could be explained through human error, oh, I forgot to renew my insurance, or I picked up mommy's car, I did not have XYZ, the act, or what we lawyers like to bandy about as mali fides, of going about the business to acquire a fraudulent imitation of a registration card should carry, in my suggestion, a higher penalty. I find myself somewhat at odds with myself in saying that I have to agree with Senator Franklin on the concerns raised in relation to the lack of insurance. But it is a valid point, and again, for consideration by the government, the impact caused when persons who drive without insurance and have a resulting accident is sometimes severe. You have innocent third parties who are affected and cannot find recourse against these individuals. It is something the insurance companies have been crying out for, and I believe it warrants further investigation and consideration by the government. And in doing this process, I would urge the government, and you have the talents of the Honourable Senator Moore and the Honourable Senator McConney in this aspect, to look at how the communication is done to the public of the new requirements under the legislation. Because recently in our office, I can give an anecdotal, we were told that we thought we didn't have to do a process, but we still had to do a process, so the process was re-implemented. And we try to keep on top with the requirements. The ordinary person may not have the resources to ensure that they do so, so how do we communicate to these persons that these are the new requirements, especially when you consider that there has been an increase with regard to the penalties? So these are factors I would commend to the government officers, and I always like to mention the technocrats within the ministries who have the skill set, but need to be given the resources to get the message out there. Now, a more pressing point of concern relates to one of the definitions utilized for the new commercial vehicle registration. And again, this is a foreshadowing of lawyers and their methods. The commercial vehicle is now defined under Section 2 of the bill as a vehicle or trailer that is used for hire, reward, or in a business enterprise. The difficulty is that business enterprise has not been defined, and it's not defined in the substantive legislation either. How do we differentiate, or what is the litmus test for determining what is a vehicle used for a business enterprise? If I am engaged in a small business and I use my vehicle mainly to go home and to go to that business, but I also use that vehicle to make the occasional delivery, does that mean that that vehicle falls within the realm of business enterprise? Now, what we lawyers would do is we would get into court and argue, well, what was the purpose of the vehicle at the time, who was driving it, and a lot of noise would be made. I would urge you to consider if the definition can be streamlined so persons could be clear. And why this is important is, imagine you have someone, let's say they bake bread occasionally. They bake bread for relatives and friends, but they charge them. And they go in and they're in the process of delivering that bread. And they're stopped by the police and say, what type of license do you have? What type of registration do you have? You have this bread in your car? Are you in the process of a business enterprise? Or are you just selling bread as a one-off? Now, it sounds like something which is somewhat fanciful, but when you start to drill down, it is a reality. And the parameters as to what is a commercial vehicle need to be clearly laid out so persons understand. When you then conjoin that with the communication to the public, I believe that this is a bill which supports the government's initiative with regard to raising revenue, understanding that there is no clearly identifiable, equitable manner in which this is to be done. However, the concept of everyone paying their portion through the utilization of gas, let's see what it leads to. With these comments, Mr. Deputy President, I will conclude my contribution.
Thank you, Senator Boyce. Senator Crystal Haynes.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy President. I rise this morning to lend my voice in support of these amendments. But I want to open by firstly discussing something that has been very topical in the press and on the airways, which would be our administration's performance in our first 100 days. So there's been a lot of banter in different quarters about our administration's performance, and some perspectives have been congratulatory, some less so. One person who sits in this house says that he would give us an F if he had to grade us. I think that his alphabet must begin with F and end with Z.
F good, fantastic.
Perhaps. The leadership of a party whose presence no longer graces these hallowed halls made reference to a honeymoon period. And as a married woman, I'm aware that honeymoon is usually romantic, luxurious, and is an escape. But nothing about taking the baton over from the previous government has been relaxing or luxurious, and there's certainly no escaping our economic realities. From the very first day that this government took the reins of power, we got to work. There was no celebratory day off. We have a number of accomplishments I believe that we can be proud of that we accomplished in our first 100 days, including the repeal of the NSRL, a 5% wage increase across the board for all civil servants who had not seen a wage increase in a decade, the greatest increase in non-contributory pensions in the nation's history, young people being able to access tertiary education at both the Barbados Community College and at the UWI, again, tuition-free, and most importantly, a commitment to the preservation of the value of the Barbados dollar, especially considering that the circumstances that were handed to us, a decade of mismanagement and pilferage, literally left us on the brink. And I think that the leadership should be commended for their commitment to the preservation of the dollar. That said, the reality is that we have had to make some tough decisions. One such tough decision, people would say, includes our decision to default on a foreign debt payment just 1 week after taking the reins of government. It was an impossible situation, although Senator Franklin calls it silly, because our situation was that we were faced with a scenario where we either default on the debt payment or we pay the debt and face the possibility of not having the foreign exchange to cover crucial imports, including food, fuel, and other things that would be essential to our people's survival. That was the reality that we were faced with. No one wants to have to make that decision in 1 weekend, okay? One such other tough decision and unpopular decision seems to be this fuel tax, okay? So I think that the conversation has not been had in the public domain with the relevant context. As Senator Franklin indicated, he called it a tax grab. I'm going to frame it differently. We are making tax collection more efficient. The reality is, we had a situation where 120,000 cars access our road networks on a daily basis. 1 in 6 of these vehicles are accessing the roads without having had paid their road tax. That was the reality of the situation. What this measure does, because no one who's driving a non-electric motor vehicle can utilize the roads unless they face the pump. So the best way of collecting the tax is to apply the tax at the pump. And the measure is actually estimated to increase revenue by $15 million simply by getting the tax defaulters, the non-compliant persons, into the tax net. Okay, so it's not really a tax grab. We're actually improving the efficiency of tax collection, which makes total sense. The other reason that I support this tax is that it is actually, to me, a more equitable tax system. I thought about my household. So I have 2 parents, both in their 70s, who pay the same road tax rate as I did. I paid $1,600 annually. My parents did as well. And when I consider that mom and dad in their 70s leave the house twice a week, wants to go to church and wants to go to the supermarket, as opposed to Crystal, who is working, Crystal who's sociable, Crystal who's coming to Senate. The reality is that this tax is a user-dependent tax. You, Caswell Franklin, and I, Crystal Haynes, determine how much we pay based on our usage. And if you're saying that you need to pay this tax to do your job, any person who's good at business should be factoring in any costs into what the costs that they're passing on to their clients or consumers, I would hope. That would make proper business sense. One of the other issues that I had with the road tax in its previous form was that the large lump sum had to be paid up front. And people from my generation would know of a band called Green Day. They had a song called Wake Me Up When September Ends. And that was what September was for me. Because not only is it my birth month, so I usually would take a trip or buy myself something nice, but I had to look for road tax and car insurance all in the same month. And it really was a headache. And my view on it is that the large lump sum payment perhaps was one of the issues that led to the non-compliance that we saw. Make sense? To me it does. One of the other things that needs to be considered, we're talking about a 40% increase at the per liter at the pump for diesel and for gasoline. What we have neglected to mention is that with the repeal of the NSRL, the net effect is actually a 28-cent increase. So when I, Crystal Haynes, consider that I used to pay $1,600 out of pocket one time, and I consider the $1,600 spread out over 12 months, it's $133 a month. My increase in monthly fuel consumption has not increased by $133. I'm not sure what Senator Franklin drove that would cost him $400 a month. And I'm sorry. Right. $400 a year it was before, but I'm sorry. But I, for one, have benefited from the new measure. Taxi and public service vehicle operators have expressed concern about the taxes being levied, justly so, I believe, because their rates are fixed, whereas the fuel cost has gone up. And as persons who access the road as frequently as they do, their costs would have increased. But as the Prime Minister indicated in her budget presentation, she, in fact, did consider them, because she had indicated that the cost of registering PSVs was cut in half. So consider that some PSV operators were paying as much as $20,000 a year. To have that number cut in half, yes, you're paying more at the pump, but you're saving $10,000 annually. Is the increase in fuel costs not offset by the savings that you have on your vehicle registration? Another factor that has not been fully fleshed out in all of the public banter about this tax is the reality that over the past 2 to 3 years, the US dollar cost per barrel of crude oil has been steadily increasing. And we have to ask ourselves whether some of the pain that people are complaining about feeling at the pump is not, in fact, caused by the cost of oil, the cost of crude oil per barrel on the international market. So I looked up the cost per barrel of oil for last September. It was below $50 US per barrel. Today, we are in a situation where the cost per barrel is $70 US per barrel, well, 69 US and some. So people also need to factor in that generally the trend is that international oil prices are on the rise, and that is one of the factors that is also contributing to the so-called pain that we're feeling at the pump. Right, so my contribution today is focused on contextualizing this new tax, okay? One of the other issues is the level of indebtedness of the country, of central government, and of the statutory corporations. So consider that the previous Barbados Labour Party government handed the former administration a surplus, and that administration took that surplus and ran Barbados down to the ground so that we are now the third most indebted country in the world. And that indebtedness is reflected in government departments. So I took a look at the estimates, and a couple of things were curious, I would say. The Transport Board is in a situation where they have $21 million allocated to them annually, $21 million. But their salaries annually are $31.4 million. So if you do the math, it simply isn't adding up. And our reality is that our revenue generating measures have to be streamlined with our expenditure, because none of this is making sense. The Ministry of Transport and Works has $128 million approved, or should have that money to function optimally, but they're functioning every single year with a $7 million shortfall. The situation is not sustainable. Another thing we have to consider, I did a little research, and a kind person gave me this document. It's called the Green Economy Scoping Study. Crystal on the other side knows all about this. And Senator Drake's. And this document indicated, yes, I can make this document at the house. Sure. And it had some interesting details in it. So Barbados apparently has the densest road network in the Western Hemisphere. The sixth densest road network in the entire world. We have 120,000 vehicles already on the road, and our vehicle growth rate, at least when this document was published, was 3.8%, where the international standard is 2.5%. So basically, we're adding more cars annually than what the international requirements are, basically meaning that our roadway capacity cannot manage the volume of cars that we're facing, okay? So we're in a situation where necessarily we have seen a level of wear and tear and crumbling of the infrastructure because of the heavy road usage. Prevailing public opinion would be that the previous administration's hands were tied and that they simply could not do better. But I'm also aware that the Inter-American Development Bank had granted the previous administration, some 2 to 3 years ago, funding for road rehabilitation. I saw that some US $25 million was approved in November 2015. Of that $25 million, the previous administration availed themselves of $300,000, so we have $24.7 million left back. An additional $34 million was also approved for cleaner fuels, and which would obviously have implications for fuel efficiency and cleaner air. And that was another loan that was not tapped into. So when the Miamali administration took the reins, they realized that this funding literally, while our infrastructure crumbled, this funding sat there languishing, and we actually ran the risk of losing access to those funds. Thankfully, within the first month of taking office, the head of the IADB was on island, and the Prime Minister seems to have been successfully able to renegotiate the conditions of those loans, because we can see in today's paper that the road rehabilitation program is due to begin in the next 2 weeks. So my hope for Barbados, as far as it pertains to our road networks and public transportation, is that we can someday reach a level of what I've experienced in traveling through the USA and through Canada, through Europe. I was astonished on a trip to Scotland a few years back when I went down to the hotel concierge desk to kindly ask them to arrange a taxi to pick me up to take me to the airport. And the reception desk told me, you don't need a taxi, you can take the bus. And I'm obviously alarmed, but they were right spot on. I mean, the air-conditioned coach showed up at the prescribed time. My suitcase was loaded onto the coach, and I had a pleasant 20-minute ride to the airport. And this is something that I hope in the coming years, after we fix the lights, after we install Senator Franklin's cameras, after all of these things happen, that we can look towards transforming the road network, making the system more efficient, and dealing with traffic congestion as well. So one of the other things I wanted to address was the role of the transportation sector in driving economic activity. The reality is, as many cars as I mentioned are on the roads, there are people who rely every single day to get their kids to school, and to get themselves to work, they need to catch a bus. And in recent years, what has happened is that no new buses were purchased. So in doing my research, I found that no buses were purchased. It was since 2006. So we were faced with a situation where the Transport Board says that their ideal fleet will be comprised of 280 vehicles. And in the earlier part of 2018, the fleet was whittled down to 62. So commuters were plagued with a situation where they were standing at bus stops or in bus terminals for the better part of a day just waiting for a bus that may actually never show. I was quite pleased to hear that the Minister of Transport and Works, along with his junior minister and the chairman of the Transport Board, have sought to get 30 new buses, which were on the road in time for back to school. So the fleet has increased from 62 to 92 already within this government's first 4 months. The other thing that I want to discuss, and this is my last point, has to do with energy consumption. The Ministry of Transport and Works is the government's third largest energy consumer, consuming 3,500 barrels of oil per day. That comes at a cost, with current oil prices, a cost of $245,000 US per day, $90 million US per year. And that has a serious drain on our foreign reserves. Something needs to be said for the move, I hope, to see the implementation of electric vehicles, not just on the burden on our foreign reserves, but also on air quality, because I can tell you, I for one have to keep my windows up nonstop. I'm not breathing in the toxicity. WHO is warning us against emissions and the risk to health. So I look forward to the year 2030, because that is the year that this government has committed to transforming Barbados into the first small island developing state that is a 100% green economy. So I think that my presentation this morning has been quite comprehensive. A number of things were bothering me as I read papers and sat listening to the radio, because I think the discussion that is largely going on in the public domain lacked context, and I hope that I was able to offer that this morning. So I thank you for your attention this morning. I'm obliged.
Thanks for your presentation, Senator Haynes. Senator Maxwell.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy President. So I rise to lend my voice to this debate on the amendment bill before this House. But I must begin, first of all, sir, by lamenting the fact that it bothers and baffles me why we are only now at this stage discussing this bill to amend the Road Traffic Act when the government has already enforced a number of measures within this bill. This reminds me, sir, of a previous occasion when we would have been here as well within this Honourable House concerning the amendment to the bill of the Water Authority Act, where 2 days just before the garbage and sewage levy was to take effect, that was already announced by the Barbados Water Authority a week before to sensitize the householders and the commercial entities that they should take note. We now come today on government's business to debate with surely the expectation of the passing of this bill, the Road Traffic Amendment Bill, for a number of measures that have already been implemented. And again, we must once again ask as to what, again, is the purpose of this Senate. As my colleague, Senator Tate, who's not here at this time, often questions, what really is our purpose? To simply come here to rubber stamp whatever is being brought to us or sent to us from the lower house? But be that as it may, Mr. Deputy President, we have this bill before us, despite the fact that the road tax has already been abolished 2.5 months ago. And as we debate this bill, we we can't do so in a vacuum, because we do know that already the already abolished road tax has led to the introduction, as we are hearing already, the introduction of a road tax that has been hailed as to be the more efficient means of collecting funds for the development and the improvement and the maintenance of our roads, and of course more so for catching the thousands of those who seek to evade the road tax annually. Now, it has been said time and time again, sir, that of course no one likes to pay
It's a point of order.
taxes.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, on a point of order. Senator Maxwell has made an assertion which I think needs to be addressed. Under the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act, Cap 85, subject to this act, I'm reading from section 3(1), subject to this act, where the imposition of a tax or an increase in the rate of an existing tax is contained in any budgetary proposals, then from the date specified by the minister in such budgetary proposals, here in the act we refer to as the specified date, the imposition of such tax shall be as effective as if an enactment had been made or passed imposing such tax, and the tax shall be as payable as from the specified date. That would be the date that the Minister of Finance indicated that they would come into effect. Any tax or increase in the rate of an existing tax which becomes payable pursuant to subsection 1 shall cease to be so payable if the appropriate enactment for the imposition of the tax or for increasing the rate of the existing tax is not made or passed within 4 months of the date on which the budgetary proposals are made into the House of Assembly. These were laid in June, and the amendment is being now so that it falls in line with the Constitution. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy President, and for that clarification by Senator Walcott. Although I really thought that we are really addressing I was really making reference to the fact of the Road Traffic Act that is really coming to us at this time in terms of making the amendment, but I am so guided that, of course, it is still in time for assisting us with ensuring that the tax that is linked to the Road Traffic Act. I'm being guided as well again by Senator Boyce, but we move on, sir. As I was mentioning, it has been said time and time that we don't like taxes, but we recognize that such, unfortunately, is a quote-unquote necessary evil for the government to provide the needed services for citizens to enjoy. And because of that dislike for taxes, surely the news then that indeed would have come to us about the abolition of the road tax was surely welcomed by many persons at face value. But I must confess, sir, that to date and this again was alluded to by Senator Haynes, that indeed there have been some negative responses to this situation of abolishing the road tax, but nevertheless implementing now the fuel tax. And I must confess that indeed a number of persons have lamented to me the fact that not only are gas prices, again, alluded to the fact that gas prices are going up and up and up, and one is essentially paying more in fuel tax to fill their tanks compared to what was initially started on the 1st of July. Persons are lamenting that they rather would pay the $400 than to submit to this fuel tax. I, like Senator Franklin, would rather pay the $400, although yes, we are saying that it will be equity among the fact that persons who use the road will not have to pay as much as those who, don't use the road will not have to pay as much as those who use the road regularly. But I would, of course, human instinct, I would rather pay the $400 because surely I would end up paying much more annually. And you know, Mr. Deputy President, I have heard the response to this cry out of the people that what the people need to do is to reduce the use of the cars on the road so that they would not, at the end of the day, have to spend more annually in fuel tax than in what they pay previously in road tax. But I have a sister. I have 5 sisters. But there's one sister in particular that I'm referring to who has 3 children. And you know, I'm sure that indeed she would have voted, I'm just assuming that she would have voted for a government that cares. And she has to transport her children to different schools and then to work 5 days a week. And then on weekends has to take them to lessons. How is she to reduce the use of her vehicle if she can't trust the bus system and she's not putting her children on the minibuses? And so because she is concerned about the safety of her children and her children getting to school on time and getting home at a good time as well, she has no choice but to go and collect them and drop them in the morning. And there are many other middle-class folks who find themselves in that situation. And so it's easier said than done to make the suggestion that we should just leave our cars home or that we should reduce the amount of travel, when indeed we are trying to look after our family and ourselves in terms of ensuring that we don't lose our job, that they get to school on time. And so, I think these need to be considered when we make our responses to persons that are crying out and suggesting that indeed they're feeling some hardship from the fuel tax. And not just ignore or write them off and say you need to use your cars less so that you wouldn't have to amount to so much to pay before the end of this year as compared to the original road tax that one was paying. Now, I do agree that such an abolition and replacement of the road tax with the fuel tax would, yes, be able to better catch the tax evaders. And I think that this is an ingenious way of raising more money, and again, I think that this was made clearly by Senator Franklin, but an ingenious way of raising, I call it ingenious way, rather than grabbing more money, but an ingenious way of raising more money directly for the economy instead of having to run around behind the tax defaulters. That's good. After all, it was stated that this move of the government is expected to bring close to 80 million as opposed to the 65 million that was previously collected faithfully by those who would have paid their road tax. And so it is estimated that indeed it will raise much more. So this has been a clever system of consumption tax being used by the government, and let me add some credit further to the government in having some heart in promising, and promises made, promises will be kept, of a percentage waiver to those whose road tax was due and paid in full after the announcement was made on the 11th of June of the abolition to take place on the 1st of July. You know, my wife was one of those fortunate ones whose road tax fell on the 20th of June. And so she wisely paid her tax, but now she has to apply to ensure that she gets that waiver of that 75%. I just hope that this refund from the government doesn't fall in the same way how our tax returns happened over the last few years or many years. But thank God I paid mine last November, so I don't feel that pressure or that serious concern that I'm losing out on much. But in the same breath, Mr. Deputy President, I do feel for those who would have had to pay their lump sum earlier this year, and unfortunately they would not have gotten any level of waiver because they fall behind or before the 11th of June. But getting back to the abolition of the road tax, sir, I do have a concern of any suggestion that is made that the fuel tax is simply a replacement of the road tax and correlated to the use of our roads, because it is not only the motorists on the road who need gasoline or diesel. We, of course, have those like the small businessmen who do landscaping with the lawnmowers and the whackers who need gasoline. Certainly, this fuel tax has struck their pockets and their profits, unless, of course, as we even heard from Senator Haynes, that you need to pass this on, of course, to the consumer. And then there are, of course, the fishermen and the jet ski operators and the owners of leisure boats who are also impacted by this hike in fuel price related to the abolition of the road tax. And we could just imagine as well that they, if they haven't started to do so as yet, will pass that impact onto their vendors or customers as well. But we also know further, Mr. Deputy President, that users of the commercial vehicles will especially be impacted by this abolition and replacement strategy of our government, especially the tour operators, the delivery companies, and we mentioned earlier the PSVs. The voices of the PSVs are already being heard, and they're crying out and they're calling, demanding for an increase in bus fares as their only recourse, because certainly the fuel tax will be eaten well into the profits they previously would have enjoyed before July 1st. You know, I don't like to be or want to be pessimistic here, but certainly we have to be careful, Mr. Deputy President, that many of these operators, if they don't get what they want or aren't given any additional concessions or have fares raised to compensate the hike in fuel price, they may leave the business and we know very well what a serious impact that may have upon our country, especially because of the fact that we don't have a lot of other buses available to cater to our country. Now, I'm not in any way here suggesting that the prices of bus fares should go up, but I'm simply saying that they do have more of a case today for their request now than they previously did before the abolition and replacement. And they need to be seriously heard, and this matter needs to be resolved as soon as possible, and I'm sure that the Minister of Transport and Works will give them that attentive ear. Mr. Deputy President, sir, this abolition as it stands is simply, as I see it, the government's means of trying to ensure not only that all vehicular road users contribute something to the infrastructure of our roads in our island, but to raise more money in the government's coffers to finance project maintenance and development of our roads, even through non-vehicular users of our roads. Barbadians should not be led then to feel that they are getting money back in their pockets by way of this amendment bill before the House this morning, well, this afternoon now. But to recognize that they are being called to essentially give more help with the infrastructure of our roads. The NSRL on gasoline and diesel, that was 12 and 11 cents per liter respectively, has been repealed. Thank God for that. But tax has been replaced, that tax has been replaced with the fuel tax, as we know, of being 40 cents per liter. So we do the math. Maybe that's why so many of us are still crying out that even though the NSRL has been repealed, the price of gas and the prices in our supermarkets have not reduced, or so people are saying. I don't do shopping very regularly. I let my wife do that. No, she does the shopping. She works out that side and she does the shopping. I ain't seen for it. But maybe, just maybe, the supermarkets and manufacturers are taking into account their fuel costs and that of their delivery and freighting companies and pass that on to the supply, to the customers, to the shoppers. I'm just saying, have no evidence. If that's the reason why there's not much price change since the NSRL has been repealed. But I want to move off on that. And Mr. President, I just want to turn some attention to the bill as it stands, and first of all raise a question in terms of the increase in the seating. And again, this links very much with what has already been shared by Senator Franklin in terms of what is mentioned in section 2B and C. And I have particular concerns, sir, about the increase, especially when it comes, as mentioned by Senator Franklin, of the route taxis, where it is stated in 2C that the number will be increased from 15 to 20. And as I understand it from the Minister of Transport and Works, these ZRs, or route taxis, were previously by law, because of the Road Traffic Act, required to retrofit their vehicles to take out a seat or two in order to reduce the number to 15. Well, we're hearing from Senator Franklin today that indeed they used to kind of, the ZR operators used to kind of trick the system and would remove them for inspection and then put them back in. But I have no evidence of that, but according to Senator Franklin. But the amendment in this part of the bill is therefore allowing our ZR operators to now keep that additional seat or seats to accommodate 20 passengers. Now, I haven't traveled in one of these ZRs for a long time. So maybe they have increased in size since then. But I do recall, sir, and I still see it today, that even with the current seating capacity of 15, we do know that the vans are often rammed off to capacity. And I'm sure already they're putting 20 persons in the van, even although it's supposed to seat 15. I I'm therefore concerned, sir, and not in agreement with the increase, because if that is already happening with a 15-seater and you're putting 20 persons in, what will happen now when you're adjusting it to 20 and they're going to find 25 in there? Unless the ZR culture changes, I cannot support necessarily the increase, because you're making even more of a risk should that van be in an accident. It's not just 15 now, not just 20, but 25 persons' lives will be put at risk. So I have a grave concern of increasing the number within these PSVs when we haven't yet control or haven't had proper control of the culture that is associated with this particular industry. Then, so my final point deals with measures being taken, having abolished the road tax to ensure that all vehicles using our roads are insured and up to date. I'm thankful to the Minister, again, of Transport and Works for giving us a visual picture, and like Senator Franklin, I was able to watch it on YouTube and recognize that he gave a sample of what this license plate will look like with the sticker to the side of it. My only concern, sir, is the size of the sticker, as it is so small, and what makes this location on the license plate any better than having a traditional registration disc to be displayed. Although I'm hearing as well from Senator Moore in her opening remarks that indeed it is not just the sticker that is going to be there on the license plate, but I now am understanding that would also be an indication on the dash, on the windscreen as well, where the original disc was. So if that is the case, I indeed will be okay with it. But if it is just simply a case of just having this small sticker on the outside on the license plate, I'm fearful that there may be some maliciousness of persons trying to tamper with this sticker on one's cars. If it is on the inside of the windshield, it may add a little bit, add a further security of ensuring that no one has direct contact to contaminate or to interfere with it. And so long as there is the additional sticker on the inside of the vehicle, I will support indeed that move of indeed having that. But like Senator Franklin, I'm still concerned as to how are we going to be policing this if in the same way we are having difficulty with persons evading road tax by maybe just displaying some falsified disc on their car, how are we really going to police this particular one to ensure that the insurance has been paid? With that, sir, I'm obliged to you.
Thanks for your measured contributions, Senator Maxwell. I see Senator Springer saying he's going to be very short before we break for lunch. Senator Springer. Too short?
Mr. Deputy President, I'd like to move that this sitting is suspended until 2:15 for lunch.
And the leader of the government business says otherwise. The question is that we break for lunch now and we return at 2:15. No break for lunch.